Bye.
Really has access to clean energy. In that role, and over the years, we also have advocated to make sure that the South and the Southeast, areas that have less favorable policies with clean energy, don't get left behind. And in the last couple of years, you may have been hearing a lot about IRA and the climate bill, et cetera. So I had the privilege of testifying in Congress in 2021, in the Senate first and then the House, on behalf of the climate bill. Basically, it was a proposal to bring millions of dollars into low and moderate income communities to ensure that everybody had access to what was typically only available to wealthier people. As you all know, solar, clean energy, et cetera, was not affordable. 10 years ago, it was 10 times more expensive. So a couple of things have happened in the last 10 years, which have made this possible, prices going down, but also the main thing that's happened is climate change. And whether man-made, not man-made, that's not the point. The point is that we have to do something about it. We have to try and reduce carbon emissions. So in the last 2 years, the green bank industry, if you wish, about 25 across the nation, now growing to about 50, to 50, to at least have one. There are a couple of states that have more than one green bank. We've been trying to move the needle on this inclusion piece. So finally, the climate bill got passed as part of the IRA package. $27 billion in 3 different buckets called NCIF, CCIA, and Solar for All. Lots of acronyms. I won't get into the details, but basically the first $20 billion of the $27 billion of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, GGRF, were designed to provide capital as basically investments, financing, to leverage private capital and mobilize and transform markets. Those 2 buckets were announced last week by the EPA, and there are 3 national coalitions that are receiving $14 billion. There are 5 national coalitions that are receiving the CCIA, which is really focused on the community's Clean Energy Investment Act. Something like that. Sorry, I forget the acronyms. But basically, one of the funds is really focused on capitalizing community-based organizations that are the boots on the ground, that are going to deliver and make sure that the funds get to communities that have traditionally been left behind, that are now called LIDAC, which are low income and disadvantaged communities. The $14 billion flow through 3 national coalitions. We are fortunate to be one of the subrecipients and part of one of those 3 coalitions that won $5 billion. So we are tasked now with figuring out ways to make sure that we deploy these funds. Now, what are these funds for? Funds are for net zero technologies. Funds are for EVs, the transportation sector, and there's a little piece for water infrastructure. So we're all now working intensely with utilities, with the private sector, with philanthropy, because there are 3 main objectives to these funds. One is to decarbonize the built environment. So we're focusing on transforming and retrofitting buildings, everything that's the built environment. Like I said, transportation, of course, is part of that. But really what we need is to form partnerships. We need to work with the private sector because they're telling us, you're going to get this federal funding, and although they're grants to the coalitions, they're not meant to be spent and go away. We have the mandate to leverage each federal dollars 5 to 7 times, meaning that for every federal dollar that we get, we have to raise 5 to 7 minimum private sector dollars. What this means is that we set up revolving loan funds in perpetuity, so that this will be a sustainable solution over time. So our number 1 goal is to reduce carbon emissions, the built environment. The second one is to mobilize capital. So everybody should become a part of the clean energy economy. And the third goal is to transform markets. So that is kind of the big picture. I've talked about 2 of the buckets of the $27 billion that make up $20 billion. There's one that we're still waiting for. It's called Solar for All. And the Solar for All is going to flow through states. However, states like Florida that passed on the opportunity to apply for these funds had the option of nonprofits, little nonprofits like us, to apply for them. So we are the lead applicant for Solar for All in Florida for $250 million. And that fund is 100% focused on low income, and that fund has grants and subsidies, so we don't put this transition on the shoulders of low-income people with debt. So that was a lot of information, but I hope you remember GGRF fund is out there, and we need to leverage it.
And Duan will also be on stage this afternoon, along with myself and a representative from National Grid, talking about just that, shifting the burden away from our most vulnerable populations. We only have a couple of minutes left, but Duan, I'm hoping that you could comment just a little bit on the LMI difference and why SELF stands alone really in the country from a green bank perspective.
Yeah, thank you. So it's always been a challenge to make sure that these solutions are inclusive. We've been hearing, some amazing work that utilities are doing across the country, but it's just not enough. We need to use all of the resources. We need to partner with community-based organizations. We need to gain the trust, but we also need to deliver products and solutions that make sense for the people. We need to meet communities where they're at. We have a product that's a little different and that we're known for nationally, which is that we do consumer loans based on ability to repay, not on credit scores. Because there are systemic barriers to accessing capital that are very hard to overcome, especially for low-income communities, underserved communities, minority communities that are underbanked and that traditionally suffer from low credit scores, low incomes, et cetera. So you put all that on to a LMI household. I mean, I'm talking about working class families that, kept us going during COVID, for example. And on top of that, they're the ones that carry the highest energy burdens. So housing costs, energy costs, capital costs are all stacked up against 40% of the population. 40% of Americans lack access to fair capital. So what we did is designed a loan product that overcomes those barriers so we can reach deeper, but we're also very careful about not giving debt to people that can't afford it. And the third thing is that whatever debt we do give, we take all the risk. Nobody loses their home. So that's a little bit our model.
It's incredible, and we would all benefit from hearing you talk for much longer about this, but there are 2 amazing keynote speakers that are about to join us here on stage. So in a closing thought, I'm wondering, what are you gonna do first? What are you doing? What are you doing here? What do you need from the people here in this room?
Yeah, the first thing that we're doing is building our capacity, looking for partners, listening more to the needs, and really the one thing I just want to say is technology. We know that we need to leverage technology to be able to do better, to scale, to reach deeper. So it's a combination of connections, connecting with people and connecting with the right technology. Because we have a big, big job ahead, and I hope that everybody in this room is aware of the opportunities that are out there to really make a historic transformation and transition. It's not like an overnight switch, but it's a step-by-step transition. So we need to replace roofs, impact windows, doors. We need to do the whole resiliency piece and then get to renewables just for a better world for everybody. So. Thank you for having us.
Can't really end on a better note than that. I'd like to thank Z Prime for being so innovative and leading this conversation, making space for Duan to come up here and talk about this. And please join me in thanking Duan Andrade.
Thank you.